Well, not really. What they're doing is they're postponing the future. And what they've done is they're agreeing, ostensibly, that they're going to allow the debt ceiling to rise, and that will forestall a default on government debt. But they're really not solving the problem. And what's important for everyone to understand that's listening is that this has been going on now into its third year. If you go back to 2011, for example, 2010, they were talking about going over the fiscal cliff. And then, of course, that went on until Standard & Poor's downgraded U.S. creditworthiness back in April of 2011. And then in 2011, they postponed it for now. And now has arrived, and now they're postponing it again. So it's more of the ineptness of the Congress and the presidency to do something substantial to solve the huge debt problem that not only the United States has, but all those people that are holding United States treasuries and other instruments in the fear that they're not going to get back what they're owed.
So how angry are Americans about this impasse between the Democrats and Republicans? What insight can you give us? What's the mood there in the general population?
Disgust. And when you look at the polls, without listening to me, and you look at the polls, and only 10% of the people have any faith in Congress. And Obama's ratings are around 37%. So it's general, it's more of the same but worse. Because what we're looking at, again, go back before the so-called debt crisis and the government shutdown, the United States was ready to attack Syria. And it's funny, isn't it? They have enough money to launch a war against Syria, but they closed down the national parks in the United States. Yeah, just to put this into perspective, the National Park Service, they give we the people the grand total of $3 billion. That's 0.07% of the national budget, which is $4 trillion. And that's the first thing they cut. The second thing they cut are the social programs like Head Start. And so the people are generally disgusted. And again, you could see it in the ratings, and they have very little faith in Congress to fix this. And then finally, on this whole issue, is that every election, every presidential and congressional and senatorial election, every one of the candidates promises that when I get elected, I'm going to balance the budget.
So Obamacare really is at the centre of the shutdown. How badly is a universal healthcare system needed in the States? Tell us what goes on in Southwest Virginia each year, for instance. You've written about this in the latest edition of the TrendsJournal.
Well, people they have no coverage at all. And matter of fact, up here in Colonial Kingston, where our headquarters are, they're having a festival this weekend. It's called the O Positive Festival. And what's happening is that doctors and dentists are giving free health care to musicians and artists because they don't have any. But we have money to wage wars. Iraq, Afghanistan, multi-trillion-dollar wars. And what's very important for the people to understand is that Obamacare is not socialized medicine. We have to pay for it, and we're being forced to buy insurance policies from the insurance giants. And these programs are very regulated. Depending on what plan you buy, that's the kind of coverage you get. And they also have a cap whereby, let's say you're a single person and you're earning $25,000 a year, if your expenses go over a certain number, well, you're obligated to pay about $6,500 U.S. dollars to cover your costs. If a family of four, $12,500. So that's really a big chunk out of somebody's budget, particularly, and again, it's all tied together, that 95% of all of the jobs that have been created in the United States over the last year have been part-time jobs. So Obamacare is really hurting the people that need the help the most and can't afford it. We're still going to have tens of millions of people without health coverage, and doctors and other the dentists and other practitioners are doing the best they can in many different ways in trying to provide the people with nothing some kind of coverage.
How would you describe the health of the global economy, Gerald? Interest rates, for instance. What do you think is going to happen with them?
At some point, they're going to have to go up. And when interest rates go up, that's when you're going to start to see the real meltdown, not only in the U.S., but everywhere. I mean, every country virtually has been lowering interest rates, except, of course, the emerging nations, which have an outflow of funds now, and they have to protect their currency, so they're raising interest rates. But the rest of the countries are only keeping it alive by the low interest rates. In the United States, the banks are borrowing money at virtually 0%, the overnight rate. So when interest rates go up, the housing recovery that we have at the level that it is, even though it's tepid compared to the heat of its previous rise, that ends. The big sales in autos, for example, they have, like they did with housing, no income verification loans. That ends. When interest rates go up, the global economy goes down, and that's why you're seeing the pressure from the emerging markets with the fear of Fed tapering, which means that the Federal Reserve will stop buying mortgage-backed securities and stop buying U.S. Treasuries bonds. And so that means the hot money that was created from these low interests going into the emerging markets is now pulling out of those markets, and that's why you're seeing problems in India and Brazil and other nations that were relying on that hot money.
Australia's not as impacted as the States, but unemployment is rising here and mining is slowly going down. What should countries with the means to do it do to improve their economy?
As I see it, as a trend forecaster, they have to build their own local economy and stop relying so much on globalization. And I say that in all sincerity. It made in Australia, made in USA, made in Indonesia, made in anywhere, rather than keep importing cheap product. And look what's happened in the United States. You know, since NAFTA, we have lost so much of our manufacturing base that we're running each year these tremendous trade deficits, about $550 billion a year. And then you go back to the whole issue of the debt ceiling. But where's the debt coming from? The debt's coming from by your spending more than you're making. So it's really building local economies at a much stronger level. You know, Annie, they use the term globalization. It's not globalization as I see it. It's multinationalization. And that's what's really doing most of the damage. You have a few that are controlling the most. And until that changes, you're only again in the United States. We look at Walmart. You know, they've taken over the country. All the mom and pop businesses that used to be in business that have gone out of business from Walmarts are in the hundreds of thousands. So now, for every one of those families that used to have an entrepreneurial life, you know, now they're stocking shelves. Look at the data of kids coming out of college. We have kids coming out of college. The debt is $1 trillion, bigger than the consumer debt. And half of them aren't finding jobs. And the ones that are finding jobs that require a high school education. So on one level after another, it's multinationalization. And until that changes, you know, I don't see it changing at all as far as restoring the domestic economies.
This is ABC Sunshine Coast. My guest this morning is trends forecaster Gerald Celente. Gerald, I always look for the good news with you. You've got your finger on the pulse. Where are the growth opportunities?
The big growth opportunities are anything to do with healthcare, and outside, of course, the traditional area, the whole health healing is going to continue to grow. Also, you have an aging population. One of the big things that we don't see that we're forecasting are longevity centers. You have that huge baby boom population around the world, you know, in the Western nations particularly, that, you know, are looking to live developed lives after they get, you know, you don't die at 60. And so that kind of thing, how to live long, healthy lives, longevity centers, and clean food. Clean food is a big one. There's so much agribusiness out there and such short supply of high quality that there's going to be more demand than supply. And you're going to see shortages, water shortages, food shortages, many shortages in many different areas. So those kind of things are always going to continue to have growth opportunity. And, of course, on the techno end, we're seeing it with all of this spying going on, whether it's NSA from the United States or Canada spying on Brazil. You name the country, somebody's spying on anybody. So anything having to do with cybersecurity, all of that too is going to be big business. And another one is all of this online education. The education systems that we have now were really developed for the industrial age, and now we're in the global age. And we can see something where it's a whole different learning system, because the learning system right now is failing in so many countries that something new is ready to be developed. And, of course, the biggest of them all is alternative energy, something beyond wind, solar, geothermal, or biofuel, something that's going to really be revolutionary as the invention of the wheel or the discovery of fire.
You've maintained, I think, for many years that you predominantly invest yourself in gold and real estate. What's your take on both of those markets right now?
Well, of course, gold prices are down, and matter of fact, I just bought some more gold last week, and I'm in gold for my golden years. I don't trade gold. I don't speculate on it. And why would I? For me, again, I don't give financial advice. Why would I want to buy paper currencies when they're printing them nonstop? And again, that's the only thing that's kept the United States and global economies going, including China's, by the way, is the continuing printing of money and dumping it into the economies to pump them up. So I'm in gold. And as far as real estate, I bought 3 historic buildings on the most historic corner in the United States, the only place on each corner where there's a pre-Revolutionary War stone building on each corner, and I bought 3 of them. But one of them, for example, I got a 15-year locked-in rate at 2.85%. That's lower than the inflation rate. So, as I said, right now, with interest rates being so low, to me, real estate is still a good buy in the States. And, of course, in many countries, the markets are overheated, China being one of them. And at some point, that bubble is going to burst. And I'm sure you're already starting to see slowdowns in Australia as your ends of commodities have shrunk into levels when China was growing at a more rapid rate than they are now, as well as other industrial, as well as other manufacturing countries. So you could start seeing pullbacks there as well. And more austerity, by the way. They're going to start selling that with your Abbott government as well as the global economies slow down. When economies slow down, they hit the people the hardest to pay the most, whether they call it VAT taxes, cutting back on so-called entitlements, or cutting back on government jobs.
Well, right now the general population is watching with interest to see whether the politicians cut back on their own entitlements for travel and other areas of expenses that they get. But that's a whole other story. Gerald Celente, really great to speak with you as always. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Annie.